my great pleasure to introduce our new university professor, Wafaa, as we all know. And just to reiterate how key the global centers fit into Linda's vision for the future of the school. And thanks for the Vice President for coming up to give us the talk. So Wafaa, I'll turn it over to you, and thanks very much.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and it's really a great pleasure to welcome Professor Safwan Masri here to tell us about the global centers, and in particular, I think to update us on some of the newest launches of global centers as well. Talk to us about the mission for the centers, and most importantly, I think he's here in order to be able to answer our questions. So. The goal is to have, I'll introduce Safwan in a minute, but then to have him give about a 20-minute presentation and then open it up for questions, which I think would be the most important, would be a very important part of this meeting. So firstly, let me introduce Professor Safwan Masri. He is currently the Vice President for Global Centers at Columbia University, and he oversees in this role the eight global centers, and he'll tell you more about them in his talk, and where they're situated, and also will tell you a bit about their mission and the vision for the global centers. Actually, it's interesting. I just realized that Professor Masri has been at Columbia University since 1988, and I've been at this university since 1988, so we've been here for a long time. But he initially was in the business school, Columbia University Business School, and he was appointed, actually, he was a professor first in 1988, and then was appointed vice dean in 1993, and he held that position for several years, for 13 years or so. His background, interestingly, is in industrial engineering. He has a bachelor's in industrial engineering, he has a master's, and also engineering management. He has a PhD in engineering management and industrial engineering from Stanford University. 1988. So he's been with the university for many, many years, has been involved in many, many different activities in terms of training, teaching, and development of innovative programs and many, many other activities. But we're here to welcome him today in his new role that he's been in for several months now as the Vice President for the Global Centers.
Thank you, Wafaa. Thanks, everyone. It's really great to be up here, and this is a diverse and fantastic group, and I'm going to take off my jacket if you'll allow me, and I'll try to keep it to 20 minutes, but I'm looking forward to the discussion, so I'll maybe go a little bit fast through some of the slides that we prepared for today, and then I'm happy to go back to any of them. I'm particularly interested in the diversity of the group and the fact that we have people from the Global Health Initiative, from the school, from various departments within the school, but also from the School of Nursing. Very interested in furthering through the global centers collaborations among the schools. So just this morning, I was on the phone with Alice Medaglia from the School of Medicine, who's working on global mental health issues, and she's working on a particular project on women's mental health in the Arab world. And so I spoke a little bit about the work that we do with this School of Public Health out of the Amman Center. I think the School of Public Health has been one of the earliest adopters of the global centers, and I'll make references to it through the presentation. But you know, I owe a very close colleague of mine at the business school, Linda Green, a gratitude, because that's how I met Wafaa, and that's how I met Lynn. So I think the issues of global health not only transcend the Uptown campus, but there are people, of course, on Morningside Heights who work on a number of issues. So bear with me, and I'll go through a couple of slides at the beginning, sort of sharing the thinking behind the global centers. Why do we have global centers, and why is our model different? I'm not saying better yet, although some of us, including myself, do think it's better than what other schools are doing. But really, the idea behind Columbia going global, and Columbia University that has been international for most of its life, it's motivated really not by a desire to bring in cash, although that would be nice, but NYU has gotten into a lot of trouble because of the NYU Abu Dhabi campus. Cornell, I recall, when they opened up the medical school there, Sandy Weil was coming to give a talk at the business school, and Mayor Feldberg, the then dean, and I asked him, why Doha? This was before Education City. And he said, $800 million to sign the dotted line. That's called the branding cost. I mean, so there are lots of advantages in doing that, but that's not what motivates us over here. And I'll come back to that model. But really, it's coming out of a realization by many around the campus, including and led by President Lee Bollinger, that we really need to expand our knowledge about the world, that we in general, as faculty and students, don't know enough about the rest of the world, that our research agendas are not as global as they might be. We're not engaged in a dialogue with the world. That we need to broaden the impact that Columbia University has around the world, develop comparative global perspectives, that it's no longer sufficient to look at, to be, for example, an East Asianist and, do your research and spend your entire career working on and in China, but not having stepped foot in India or in Africa, and to lack that global perspective. We'd like to, and I'll come back to this point, address some global challenges that Columbia may be very well suited to try to address through an interdisciplinary approach, give our students a distinct global education, and deepen our outreach to our alumni and prospective students around the world. So, we've always been international. The School of Public Health, Mailman, has been one of the leaders in our international efforts over the decades. CEPA, the Earth Institute, and others. Faculty research spans across the world, and our faculty and student body are quite diverse. But that's not really what we mean by global. In other words, the way that we distinguish between global and international is, number one, in order for us to understand a region of the world, we need to understand it within a global context. It's not sufficient to focus on a region and understand things from an international or a regional or an area studies perspective. What became very popular and very important after the Second World War served us very well for many decades, and it became very important to understand certain regions of the world. But I think in a much more interconnected world, we have the opportunity and the mandate to really understand those regions within a global context, but also address global issues and challenges in an interdisciplinary manner. In other words, to address water issues in Chile, it does behoove us to study and look at water issues in Africa and elsewhere in the world. Recognize the connections among the different regions across disciplines. So the approach is distinguished by, number one, these global centers are university-wide hubs. Okay, so they don't serve any specific part of the university. We're already across 5 continents. They are just as much about research as they are about education and outreach. They are very much about engaging in the global dialogue. So not everything that we do has to be about courses or programs or research projects. In many instances, they have allowed us an opportunity to engage in a conversation with the rest of the world that would not be as easy to have here on campus. So I'll mention one example. The Women Creating Change initiative that's being led by Jean Howard and Leila Abel-Logod and Judith Butler and Marianne Hirsch and a number of other faculty who come from sociology and anthropology and the arts and sciences and humanities, have now been carrying on a series of workshops and conferences that started in Amman, focusing on women and Sharia. Went to Mumbai and focused on women and empowerment in an urban slum context that they're taking then to Rio, in Paris, in Istanbul, focusing on different things. And out of those workshops and conversations and expanding network, research work is with impact is coming up. And it's important also to note that we don't pretend that the global centers are the solution to or the answer to the question of how do we further engage, how do we further globalize the university. There's a lot that's been going on for a very long time. We want to build on it, and there's a lot else that is going on concurrently. So our mission statement is that we provide regional platforms for the university to promote and facilitate the engagement of faculty, students, and alumni with the world, address global challenges, and advance knowledge and its exchange. We're very careful in that we don't pretend for these to be outposts of the university. that try to impose a certain way of thinking or doing things. We are always very careful to understand and appreciate the fact that the primary objective for having these global centers out there in the world is that so that we can benefit, so that we can learn, and we can understand the world better and contribute to its development in the process. Compared to the let's say the branch campus model, which I don't shy away from saying that it's not only led by financial motivations to a very large extent. It's a bit neo-colonial in that faculty parachute in, teach, and get out. There isn't much in the way of a conversation and dialogue and learning. And I think from a national point of view, so if I were a Qatari, for example, but I am an Arab American, and so when I see all the money that's being spent on those kinds of initiatives without instead of investing in building capacity, it's about branding, brand import as opposed to investing in building local capacity. So we're engaged with the global centers actually with a number of entities, and maybe I'll mention one or two examples where we're actually helping local institutions build capacity as we learn about in the process. Are other universities pursuing this model? Yes and no. So Harvard Business School has research centers around the world, but they serve the business school, and they're about the business school, although they did rebrand and relaunch their Shanghai center to become more of a university center. There are a number of universities that have regional studies centers. So I think Georgetown in Turkey, I think Yale in India, and so on. There are a number of partnerships. So Duke and the National University of Singapore, or Yale and the National University of Singapore. Chicago, interestingly, does have only two centers, one in Paris and one in Beijing, but they do look and feel very much like ours. So just sort of to provide perspective and the benchmark. So we're in these 8 places. I'll stop at each one of them very quickly. We don't have a template. We're not trying to create the same thing everywhere around the world. We want this to be organic. We want it to grow naturally. They vary by size. They vary by staff. They vary by current foci. And much of it depends on the funding that we got, and they're all reliant on local and regional funding by alumni for the operations, the money that allows us to turn on the lights and pay the salaries. And then, of course, projects and programs that come through pay for themselves and contribute to the overall operation of the center. So we have leadership now at all of the centers. I'll just highlight a couple of people. I'll start with Joan Kaufman, only because she's a public health specialist, and she's worked with some of you here at the school, and I think she now has an appointment at the school. She taught public health at Brandeis and Harvard and spent many, many years in China. Paul Leclerc is running the Paris Center. Paul may be known to many of you. He was the president of the New York Public Library for many years, very successful tenure, thought he was retiring, coming to chair the Maison Française on campus, and we hired him to run the Paris Center. We have a couple of people who have worked and spent their careers with the Earth Institute, and in places like Nairobi and Mumbai in particular, where the Earth Institute has had a very strong presence, and we built the global centers around the Earth Institute presence over there. The Amman Center and Beijing were the first two to launch. Amman, we have a very large facility that's been made available to us. We have 28 employees. We're working on any number of things, including in public health and sustainable development and social work, arts and culture, and so on. Mumbai, give you an idea, it's a much smaller office, but with access to facilities right across the street from the Trident Hotel in Nariman Point, for any of you who know Mumbai. So we're able to host conferences and classes and things that we would want to. Istanbul, a very small operation that's been around now for a bit over a year. Paris is in Reed Hall. Reed Hall is the building that was sold to Columbia back in the early 1960s, has been the base for a lot of undergraduate education programs for our students in Europe. So now it's been rebranded and restructured as our global center for Europe. In Nairobi, we just launched this past January. And Wafaa was there, and so was Lee Goldman, and they participated in the launch. And I think the Nairobi Center probably has particular relevance to many here in the room. Beijing, we relaunched it this past fall with the new facility and with a new director on board. It's a great facility, and we can have parallel programs going on, which can accommodate about 80 people each. Santiago, we launched a year ago. It's in the same building as Harvard's Latin American Studies Center and a couple of other organizations. So we have in that building access to an auditorium, to classrooms and meeting rooms, and so on. And in Rio, we had the last launch about a month ago, and in a beautiful building in the center of Rio. Why Rio? Why any of those places? Serendipity plays a role. Alumni, and we're in Mumbai, we're not in Delhi, because our rich alumni are in Mumbai and not in Delhi. But we are regional. And so, in Amman, we support programs that are throughout the region. And Wafaa and I were with Lee Bollinger in Cairo, for example, in January as an extension of a program. But one of the reasons, though, is we follow where other units of the university may already have presence. School of Public Health is all over. And I think, we were trying very hard to see how we can link up the activities. The School of Architecture has been setting up design studios around the world, experimental studios called Studio X. So they happened to go to Rio a couple of years before we decided to go there, and had already established very strong roots and a wonderful relationship with the leadership of the state of Rio and the city of Rio. So we were invited and provided a lot of facilities to be there. And in New York, we're in Law Library and on 113th Street. Let me spend a minute talking about funding opportunities. So when I took on this position from my predecessor, Ken Pruitt, this past summer, I said that the two most important priorities I saw for myself were, number one, to bring stability into the network, meaning proper governance, funding mechanisms, permanent leadership at all the centers, and we've accomplished that. And we have now completed what we call the first phase of the Columbia Global Centers, meaning we don't anticipate expanding or adding any centers within the next couple of years in the near future. It's not unlikely that in 2 to 3 years we might be contemplating 1 or 2 other centers in other places. But Africa is a very big and a very important continent. We're in Nairobi. The School of Architecture is in Johannesburg. GHI and School of Social Work are in other places. So, we can make those connections, but it's not inconceivable that in 2 or 3 years we might want to consider another center in Africa and maybe a center in Eastern Europe. The second priority was to really expand and deepen the reach to the faculty within the university, and this is part of that effort. We established a Global Innovation Fund. Hope that all of you are familiar with it. I know that many of you are applying for funding and have been in touch with me and with my colleagues about opportunities to leverage the global centers to advance your research. And if you don't have the RFP, we'll be happy to send it to you or to send you a link to it. But the idea is to encourage faculty to think about using the global centers and using more than one global center, perhaps for a project to advance teaching, to advance research, but also to hold conferences and workshops and have dialogues. There are other mechanisms that are less relevant over here, but more relevant for people in the humanities and the social sciences. Let me just finish with what do we see as the pillars of the global centers. So we're there to support and help advance the research of faculty and students. We help put on programs, programs that could be of many different natures. I'll give you a couple of examples. Education for our own students, and outreach. So on research, give you a couple of examples. And these are things, try to pick up examples of things that would not necessarily have been possible without the global centers. Okay, so the School of Social Work had really no traction in Jordan, or for that matter, in the rest of the Arab world anywhere. And now we have, through engagement with the Global Center, trained more than 450 social workers in Jordan. We have currently enrolled 10 students in the master's degree program at the School of Social Work on scholarship, partially funded by Open Society and partially by private individuals from Jordan. Out of that work also, there's a research project that is developing programs to promote the healthy growth and development of children who are victims of maltreatment. In Africa, there's a project in partnership with the Earth Institute and the UNDP and the Millennium Promise to end extreme poverty that predated the existence of the global centers. So that does not fit in with that criteria. A research project aiming to establish a think tank to help China meet the challenges of urbanization, jointly between Columbia, Tsinghua University, funded by McKinsey, a global inequality project that is taking place at the Mumbai Center. So those are examples of some research projects that are housed, supported by the centers. And when I say housed and supported, it could be physically housed, supported through the network, supported through the faculty, through the staff. So we have researchers who reside at the centers and can provide support. Maybe in the discussion piece, Wafaa and others can talk about how they've leveraged the global centers. Programs. So programs tend to be capacity building programs, programs in which we engage with and help set up local entities. So with Teachers College, we've been very, very strong partners, and we started off with a big program in Jordan that is now going to Istanbul. Separately, we have something that is starting in Santiago and another in Rio. Other capacity building programs, the Institute for Sustainable Development Program, which has trained more than 380 development practitioners in Jordan, provides policy support. A program to translate into Arabic seminal works on democracy, toleration, that are going to be disseminated in places such as Egypt. Then on the education, so we have programs for undergraduates and for graduates, courses through which faculty travel with students using the global centers. I'll highlight one. We have currently about 20 students who are in Kenya, joined by students from Princeton and from the University of Nairobi, taking a 16-credit course on environment, ecology, and ecosystems. The environmental sustainability in the Middle East is a course that will be offered for the first time this summer, a 2-week course that will bring together students from New York and students from the Porter School of Environmental Studies in Tel Aviv, where the students will spend a week in Jordan and then a week in Israel. So some of it is experimental, some of it is about bringing students together from various parts of the world with our students. And some of it is taking courses such as the Summer Arabic Language Program, which had always been taught on the main campus, that now are not taught in New York anymore. They're taught in Jordan because the faculty travel with the students, spend the 8-9 weeks there, and the students get to learn and practice the language and get the cultural immersion in the country. The Global Scholars Program is another one of those innovative experimental programs that we started with, where students travel again with their faculty, work on research projects. Last year we did it in Paris, and then we did it in Beijing, Shanghai, and Mumbai. This year it will be in Beijing and Santiago. Outreach, all kinds of things, speakers. We use the centers as platforms to connect with our alumni. We bring in speakers on a regular basis. Wafaa has delivered talks at the center, so has Linda. This month alone, we have Rashid Al-Khalidi and Joe Stiglitz giving talks at the Amman Center, either because they're traveling through or because we've invited them to come. And that's a great way to connect with the outside world and to, there's Wafaa when we were in Cairo. I'll end with the global themes. So there are these things that are happening at the centers, and some of them are happening at a subset of the network together. Our focus now, so going into next year, there's going to be a huge focus on students so that we don't only do the small experimental, as valuable as that is, but try to create bigger opportunities for our students, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. But then also to think about themes or challenges that are global, that can bring together faculty from throughout the campus to work on projects that are multi-year, interdisciplinary, funded, and that would leverage the global centers. And I think that that's a phenomenal opportunity for the Mailman faculty to be involved in. It's not official yet, so it's not public, so I say it in confidence within this room. You know, there is talk, and there will be something coming out within the next few months that will speak to the establishment of a global policy institute on campus that would bring together, that would accomplish exactly what I just said. You know, bring together faculty from various disciplines to work on projects that are of a global challenge. So when we think about those, you know, what are those things? You know, it's freedoms of expression and press and so on, which we've started working on using education, inequality, arts and culture, financial system, sustainable cities. Sustainable cities is sort of a placeholder. Finally, when I did a variation of this presentation to the trustees last month, one of the questions that I knew was going to be asked is, well, sounds great, okay, it's not costing the university money, you know, it's being funded, it gets us out there and so on and so forth, creates opportunities. How do we know that we've succeeded? One measure is, of course, the numbers, you know, how many faculty, how many students, how many alumni, but that only tells a very small part of the story. I think it's one of those things where, you know, we'll know it when we see it, and just like, you know, Mailman, you don't think about the fact that it is global. You know, you take for granted that the health issues, the public health issues that Mailman faculty look at and that students get exposed to in the classroom, look at the entire world. We hope to accomplish that, you know, throughout the campus, that there is a global intellectual transformation that's taking place, that our research has a global reach, that our students are distinguished for their global perspective. You know, that when we are recruiting students, one of the reasons they decide to apply and to accept an offer of admission from Columbia is because we have this network of global centers. And similarly, when we try to hire faculty, the global centers and what we're doing on campus in the area of globalization really matters. So that's the introduction, and let me maybe sit down and have a conversation going.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
So we're going to open it up for discussion now. So yes.
Thank you for this presentation. My question is about how truly regional these centers can be. You mentioned that donors were able to essentially impose Mumbai as the seat of one of the centers, and you know, maybe that's fine. I'm more concerned about the perception of Beijing with respect to Southeast Asian countries, where, if anything, there's a bit of pushback, you know, against this enormous country that is growing so fast. So, if some of us who are interested in Southeast Asia, how do you suggest to deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we'd actually started to explore Southeast Asia, and we are planning a trip this fall to countries that we have not yet been to as part of this exploration phase. But I would say that the Beijing Center and the Mumbai Center both go out there. And I know that you were with John, for example, in Myanmar not too long ago. You know, we have activities that have taken place in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in other places. So again, you know, because of the nature of these centers, that it's not in a tourist campus, it would be a different thing, right? Because then you would become very dependent on that campus, on that location. But the resources within the centers, drone, Linocom, and so on, can help and assist and can travel with and support programs that are taking place anywhere in that part. But when I say, don't be surprised if in 15 years we're talking about 2 or 3 additional centers. If I had to bet, I would say that one would be in Africa, a second one in Africa, one would be in Eastern Europe, the Balkans, the Caucasus, and one would probably be in Southeast Asia.
So,
Yes.
coming back to Southeast Asia, we have been working in Bangladesh for the last 12 years, and so my question is how Bangladesh project can take advantage of this global outreach through one of the centers, or how the Bangladesh experience can be shared with the rest of the centers. Because it is fascinating. You just pick up the phone and talk to someone in the center and they know all the answer. But even for me from Bangladesh, it's very difficult at the beginning to provide all the answer to scientists, and still we struggle for small things. So.
Yeah, that's again a great question, and I'm happy for anybody to make any suggestions. But it is the regional expertise that we have at the centers are developing and they're growing, right? And we have to often rely on our network regionally. So one of the things that we really look for in a director and in the staff around that director is how well networked they are within the region. So for example, I continue to direct the Amman Center, right? In North Africa, I know Egypt very well, but I know Libya to some extent. I do not know Tunisia. I don't really know Algeria. But I would have to rely on connections that I have in the academic and non-academic circles. If the question comes up by a faculty member who's interested in doing something in one of those places. I should also mention that very soon there will be a launch of something called the Columbia Global Commons. Is that the name of Bristol? Okay.
Yeah.
Which is really going to be a phenomenal repository of information about the world at Columbia. So through it, one would be able to search for expertise in any discipline, in any field, by any faculty. The work that we do in any part of the world, Maria may know more about it than I do, but that's going to help a great deal in answering some of those things. But to give you a more direct answer, I would say if there is an interest in a project in a part of the world or in a country where we don't have a center, by all means, feel free to recommend that the person get in touch with me or you get in touch with me, and I'll try to help one way or the other.
I just wanted to add one thing, maybe, and then we'll take more questions. But as many of you are aware in this room, several months ago we did send out the survey about global work faculty and where they were working and what they were doing with the help of Melissa and Alberto, whatever it is, Alberto, from GHI. And I think we've collated the data that you completed, and working very hard now with the Communications Office, and Maria is leading that effort to develop a map as well, mapping of all the activities that are by the faculty. And we're hoping to link that with the Global Commons as well. So I think it will be very helpful. The other, maybe I can ask a question, Safwan, that's come up again and again, is that, and we've talked about this, is that it's the faculty here at Mailman are very committed to bi-directionality, or like you said, use the term building capacity, kind of having it be a two-way street rather than be a one-way street, focus solely on our faculty and our students. And there's been a lot of interest in demonstrating as well to the partners they have overseas that this is a two-way street. Right. And I know that there's some initiatives that you may want to mention about scholars coming here as well to Columbia from overseas to avail themselves of some opportunities. I think that maybe you can share a little bit about the thinking in terms of also not just our faculty and our students offering an opportunity globally, but also offering our campus to colleagues overseas. So maybe you can comment on some of your initiatives.
Okay, so so for example, the example I used from the School of Social Work, where we have people who are getting their masters over here on scholarship, is a good example of that. We also have a program in Paris and in Amman for hosting visiting faculty and scholars and fellows from all over, where they get to interact with one another and with Columbia faculty. Teachers College programs have also brought a lot of the trainees, if you will, to New York to spend time over here. I know that Lee Goldman is very interested in doing something along those lines, and there's Richard, also one of the users of the global centers, at least in Amman and Nairobi, for the nutrition program. But I think a good example of this would be the two examples. So we had a Chile week on campus, and we are going to have a Turkey week on campus, I think, in the fall. Both have been about showcasing and highlighting some of the exciting work that is going on in those countries in the case of Chile, it was by scientists in particular, but also highlighting some of the challenges and seeking to get some conversations started. So we hope to do more and more of that, but also the bi-directional speaker series. Okay, so we're launching with out of the Amman Center, with the East Institute on campus, a bi-directional guest lecturer series, where every year you have 3 or 4 people going there from here to the region, and you have people coming from there. Is that what you had in mind, or were you thinking of anything?
Yeah, I think those are great examples. I think the other issue has been the building capacity of indigenous institutions, like
okay.
the example of, I think, in Amman, of their social work infrastructure. I think this is the kind of commitment to kind of building.
Okay, so the Teachers College work, again using Amman as an example, and the Queen Rania Teacher Academy is a prime example of that. And in a way, it predated the Global Center presence. And with all the Global Centers, in an ideal world, you have a couple of programs already going, and then you build around them. And that will be the approach going forward with any centers that we add. So, if we end up in a place like Indonesia, it will be because we already have some work going on here, public health, and then we're adding something from a couple of other schools, and all of us, and then we have the resources available and somebody willing to fund it, and it makes sense for us to have a global center around all of that. That's what happened in Jordan around public school teachers training, and we set up for them an independent NGO called the Queen Rania Teacher Academy. Okay, and that became our partner. So rather than us going in, bringing teachers into the Columbia facility or into New York, training them and then sending them back, the first thing that we did is we helped them establish their own independent, indigenous, if you will, academy. And we started, at the beginning, we did all the training. We helped them hire people. Then it moved 3-4 years into it, where a good number of the programs were co-taught, if you will, going. And now it's to the point where I think for the plan for next year is most of the programs are going to be taught by locally hired faculty who've been working with Teachers College faculty for the past 3, 4, 5 years. So the role of Teachers College and Columbia becomes an advisory one. And then, we sort of disappear maybe in 9, 10 years from the beginning. And in the process, we've learned a tremendous amount. I mean, I can't remember if it was School of Social Work or Teachers College, I think School of Social Work, but some staggering number of published journal articles that apparently faculty have published based on the work that they have been doing in Jordan.
Yes.
Do you, in the host countries, do you have a small grants program, or are you thinking about it? Because because I think it could sort of convey two things that are quite current in the U.S. system, which is peer review, And some of the countries you're talking about, it's, a lot of it is hierarchy and how long you've been in the system. So you could also favor more junior scientists. Are you thinking about that? Do you think your donors might be interested in something like that?
That's an interesting thought. That's an interesting thought. I think this could have currency in some countries, perhaps more than others. Yeah, but we'd love to.
I mean, your institute does it here internally, just a regular call that people can expect.
Yeah. So so the President's Global Innovation Fund is a very new thing, right? And we're doing it for the first time now, and I hope that this will lead to more things like this. In some countries, there are the equivalents of an NSF or the NIH and other young investigators. In some countries, that exists. So in Chile, in particular, they're very focused on the sciences, and we now just got a grant that would give us only $80,000 the first year, but will grow to $1 million if it's successful. This is just Colombia. They've done it at MIT and one other university, and now we just signed on with them for Colombia, where faculty would apply and would get funding to do work in the sciences.
Any questions?
What about some of the students, perhaps?
I spent time with a group in Brazil, in Rio, called the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, actually on behalf of the Global Health Initiative. And regarding, I think, collaborations with students coming here, graduate students, or undergraduates, or visiting researchers, I think the largest challenge, and I've also spent some time in China, Beijing, is where they're coming from systems where they're not paying for a graduate school, and they receive in Brazil called bolsas, like stipends to attend school. Like we were able to take classes at the National School of Public Health in Rio as visiting students. We kind of how to overcome that challenge, I guess. If they came here to New York.
The tuition.
The tuition, the service system we have. Or, I mean, obviously, seeking scholarship innovation is great.
So, again, I'm going to go back to Chile, and the woman who's running the Chile Center is an alumni from SIPA from the early 1990s. She served as Minister of Energy and of Mining under Bachelet. Incredibly well connected, right? And very jealous for Colombia. And so, because she is running the center and because of the connections that she has, we now have 60 plus Chilean students. Chile is a small country, to have 60 students concurrently at Columbia is a huge thing. And I think the vast majority of them are funded by the Chilean government through a program that we signed onto with them. I know that we have something similar in Brazil, Science Without Borders, that program.
No, it's definitely a great program. It does send researchers.
Right, yeah. And I think we will see more and more of those kind of things in the networks that we have in place. And Karen has reassured me that if Bachelet wins, which is, she's expected to win, she's not going to go back to government. Tell me about, yes, please.
Sure. It's two questions for you. I'm sorry I was late. We were still seeing patients. My name is Vishal Patel. I'm one of the dermatologic surgeons here. I've been recruited to be faculty to head the Global Health Dermatology program here, which is kind of separated from the Mailman program here. And a lot of the programs, from my understanding, being a medicine resident and derm resident here and a fellow here, the medical center, the public health program here, sometimes, at least the medical side, has difficulty interacting or working with, at least it's been when you were a resident who were interested in global health. And my question is, with these global centers, what's the best way for young clinical faculty who have a very directed program model? And I'm actually writing the grant for the President's Fund right now. I have to go home and finish it today because I need to send it to UCSF, where we're hoping to partner with. They have this early detection model in Uganda and Tanzania and Kenya. We'd like to do a squamous cell basal cell melanoma program in the same region, but I'm kind of at a loss because I have no way to find somebody to partner with, either from a mentorship standpoint or from a ecological partnership standpoint?
Partner with in the regions, you mean? Or-
No, just from here, because, I mean, from my understanding from the fund, is that it promotes collaboration.
For the grants.
For the grant.
For the grants.
But from even beyond that, from partnering from that, our partnerships that we know are from Penn and UCSF and Harvard, and that was why I was really interested in here, is to try to figure out how do we get in touch with people who are there on the ground that we can partner with.
Great. Okay.
From a clinical side.
Right.
Because we're really clinical.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
90% of my time is with skin cancer,
Yeah.
that's it.
And where's Richard? Is Richard here? Yeah. Okay. So maybe you can help me answer that question. But I would say the first thing to do is to get in touch with us. So I mean, if you're thinking about a particular area of the world, to get in touch with the director and or me, the director for the center that's in that region. We sometimes have information available, and I think actually with the RFP that went out, there was an appendix that also included the institutions that the center is connected with in the government and non-government sectors. And it's a partial list, right? So in some cases, we can tell you, oh, yes, we know exactly who we should connect with and what university is the best university to work with in this regard. Or we might tell you that we can explore this further, because we rely a lot on our network, right? And if an answer is not directly transparent to us, we have staff who do the research to make the calls. When you're there on the ground, it's much easier, of course, to do that. And if it's not in the city or in the country where the center is located, we rely on our network. So, for example, in the Middle East, there's a lot that's going on in Egypt, and there's a lot of attention on Egypt. And I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be observing and participating in what's going on in Egypt. And when we're in Cairo, I often get asked, well, do you think you might have a global center in Cairo? And I say, somewhat teasingly, in front of Lisa Anderson, former Dean of SIPA, who's now the president of the American University in Cairo, we already have a global center. Okay, it's a virtual global center because we rely heavily on AUC. So, if you were to do something in Egypt, I would not know who your counterparts would be or who the people to connect with are, but I know people who will know.
I think in addition, I think obviously you should reach out to the Global Health Initiative here because we have also bridges across from the medical school, the nursing school, the School of Public Health, the dental school. So we can also connect you. I think it's very complex. It all depends if it's a research or it's a service that we're proposing, but we certainly can also assist as well.
Sure. The global centers, is it better rather than recreating the wheel? So I say UCSF because UCSF has done Jeff Martin into Mayor. They've done a lot of KS work there, and they built a program. And I'm trying to, at my point when I start my faculty appointment here, do we recreate the wheel and try to do what they did, or kind of tie on and bring our global center to partner with them?
Incredibly open and encouraging of partnerships that would bring in other universities.
Because that's how I'm trying to write the grant, to figure out what we'll get from it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we do partner. I mean, I don't know if you were here, but one example I mentioned over here, not only with local, which I showed a few examples of, but the 16 credit course that's taking place right now in Kenya that brings together Columbia and Princeton students. So we're definitely open to partnership. The one thing we're not open to, and we've been approached quite a bit about it, is Stanford wanted to, for example, rent space from us, use our administrative services. That we're not going to do, but we'll partner.
Questions or comments? It's your opportunity here, so.
I mean, do you see the global centers adding a dimension? I mean, with all the global stuff that is going on at Mailman, and the fact that so many of you work all around the world, what is the greatest value to you? Is there value of having the global centers? Or, I'm interested to know sort of to what extent some of you may walk out here saying, hey, that was interesting and I could make some use of it and something to think about, versus, okay, you know, that's interesting. We don't really need it because there isn't much that it can do for me because I already have what I need.
We could take a problem. The case of Bangladesh is interesting. That's one of the world's poorest countries. It's also a country that's on track for MDGs. They help MDGs remarkably. There's a center there that many of us have worked with, the International Center for Diarrheal Disease Research, Bangladesh. The director is new. He would like to branch out, he says, into global, he'd like it to make it a more international field. We're aware that in Africa, there are countries that are equivalently poor, that lack that capability, lack the research capacity, and they're isolated. They want to work with Bangladesh. They have no link there. So, is there a way that the Global Center could help with this institutional bridge building?
Absolutely, there's no question about it, and I'll say two things on that. One is, you know, when I kept saying the dialogue with the world, this is a perfect example of it. You know, we hope to be able to be connecting people, you know, across the regions, you know, Colombia and non-Colombia people and affiliates and so on. So, you know, connecting that center with our network that's based at the center in Nairobi would be something we would want to do, would be easy to do. The other thing I'll say about that, it so happens that Mahmoud Ramdani, who is the chair of the faculty steering committee for Nairobi, has proposed, and we're moving forward with a convening that would bring together people from South Asia and East Africa and sort of the Middle East, you know, the Indian Ocean basin, if you will. A convening to start a conversation about the kinds of things where you can link up, you know, those countries and those regions. I'll say a third thing, which is, you know, Pakistan is also a country of great interest and one that is not necessarily easy to work in out of Mumbai. So, you know, India does provide some advantages, but it also provides some limitations. We have somebody in Pakistan, in Karachi, who very much wants us to be there. He actually, when I was in Karachi in November, he insisted on showing me the house that he had bought for another purpose that could be ours tomorrow. He wanted to set up over there. And so, you know, and we agreed that he would fund interesting projects, and he has a foundation in Pakistan, and then, you know, out of that, hopefully would grow a global center over the years.
The disease of the future around the world is probably heart disease. It is not the disease of the present interest. What would be the process of presenting a proposal using the resources of the center to set up some inaugural program to bring the kind of public health insights about this orphan monster that may be well received abroad, if not funded now?
I think we're proposing something together.
Yeah.
So I'd say the short-term answer is great that the proposal is coming.
Yeah.
It would be the President's Global Innovation Fund that could provide some seed money to at least convene some conferences to try to explore and learn. But I also think the institute that I mentioned earlier, I think that's going to be an opportunity to bring in some real substantial funding.
Institute on policy.
Yeah. And you know, policy may or may not actually exist in the final name of the institute, but the idea is that this will be a home on campus, okay, that will be where projects that are multi-year, that address global challenges will come together, and there are people out there who are interested in funding such things if they can really make an impact. So when you think about the 3, 4, 5 important themes, what would they be? It's education, it's health, right? It's the global economy, it is inequality, it is the issue of urbanization in cities. freedoms, right? And, so then you have to pause and think about the rest, but those are the ones that you don't even have to pause to come up with. So I see that as possibly something that could reside within a larger context later on in the presence of the institutes. But in the meantime, the President's Global Innovation Fund, I think, would be a very good place to try to tap into.
Okay, yes.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. So I'm thinking about students who are looking to go overseas for practicum. We have at least 100 students every year from our school who go overseas in the summer or for 6 months to do practical work. And I think it might be great if, I know you're going to be reaching out to the alumni networks in all the countries where the global centers are, if there was some way that students could sort of have access to who the alumni are, what they're doing as a way of then, networking further. I think it's just really, really
absolutely. So we can do that in a deliberate manner. So if you email us and let us know about what you have in mind, we can structure it. So I'll give you an example of something that is ongoing successfully. There's something called the CEO program for undergraduates, which is the career experience overseas, right? And students apply, and they declare that they want to work in one of the cities that this program is available. And so it's available in, I think, almost all of the global center cities. And they want to work for profit, not for profit, what have you. Then the center, working with the program office here on campus, identifies the employers. Part of the program is you get a mentor who is an alum of the university. And so we're doing it in some cases for the second or third rounds. And it's been going very, very successfully. And that's, in order to get to that point, of course, the centers have to do research about the alumni and who's interested in mentoring and what is it that they're doing. So that's something we can definitely follow up on. And we have a person who's on our staff also in New York, whose job is to help us on the alumni development.
Yes, maybe I'll go to you first.
I just want to close that I'm a fellow here at the Institute of Human Nutrition and Department of Epidemiology, and I'm finishing my PhD, and I'm a psychiatrist from Brazil, and I'm on my way back. I'm going to be working in the Department of Psychiatry and also the Department of Epidemiology, kind of bridging. And I'm very interested in global mental health, and I've already been working some studies here, and I've probably been working in another hub in São Paulo. And I'd like very much to connect with you, with the open.
That's great. That's wonderful. Be more than happy to connect you. Yeah. And again, on this, and I hope people will pick this up. We've also, we included my email address, but also the email addresses of the directors for all the centers. You can email me or email Tom Jabat, who directs the center in Rio, and say you'd like to follow up.
I think, go ahead.
So the question that was just asked about sending our students to the centers, but I'm interested in also thinking about the students who actually come here from different countries. And we tend to have students whose parents have good bank accounts. And yet there's a large number, the majority, of students who are left behind in these countries who are very bright, and there may not be a particular graduate program in epidemiology. Is there any idea of having funding to have these centers be a selection place where they could identify the brightest and the best who could come here, and you would support them to spend 2 years to get an MBA?
Yes. So absolutely, we can work on this. We've done this now through the Santiago Center with a number of fields on campus, the program that they have. In Jordan, where there is no such program, Jordan is not a rich country, but because of alumni and friends with these pockets and because of the Open Society, we have now, as I said, 10 students getting their masters in social work. This is a country where there were only 3 professionally trained social workers in the entire country when we started. And we also have a program where people come and train with the Masters in Sustainable Development. Now, we can't identify the students, we can advertise, because there are, your admissions office will not want us to be involved. Sorry?
You can triage them to.
We can advertise, and then the applications would have to come over here, and and then it goes through the process. But certainly we can help, and we can help identify funding mechanisms. Definitely.
And that process would facilitate applicants from coming from other countries that are not involved with global centers, like Tajikistan, where there's no hope, or Zimbabwe, where there's no connection at the moment. But if we did a more open advertising, and they could come.
Exactly. Yeah. So no, we can tailor something. We can tailor something working with you. But this also reminds me of a point I just want to make very quickly. We talked a lot, and I asked about how the global centers can be of use, but, and of course, it goes without saying that you have been, and I think can be of tremendous use to the global centers and to advancing the strategy. So, I've benefited greatly from Richard and the group's work that was already going on in the Palestinian territories and elsewhere in the region. Same thing with Africa, because we can build on it. Same thing with Wafaa. Just two side notes to that. One is you can help us a great deal also because of not only your ability to identify needs in certain countries, in certain areas, but because of your presence and your connections over there. And then the other thing is I invite you to visit. I think, Wafaa, I don't want to speak for you, but one of the things that got you to become very involved is when you wanted to have your ICAP conference 3 years ago, annual meeting, and yes, and I said, come to Amman, we'll facilitate it, and you had a good experience, and that exposed you, and just didn't want to end the meeting without you saying this.
Yes, and maybe the last question, Richard.
It's not a question. I'm just going to say that I've been working in the Middle East, and we've been working in East Africa for setting the Middle East on NCDs and other kinds. What I would encourage everyone here, when you're in the region, drop in or arrange an appointment with the global centers, because from my own experience, the Institute of Human Nutrition have been tremendously helpful. And we actually had a pre-proposal approved in Jordan, and all really through the global center, and we hope to turn that into a real program. In Africa, we were working on the PhD program, which is now in the planning phase, funded by the African Development Bank. And we started before actually it opened, but our office is in the global center, and the global center has just facilitated what we're doing to a tremendous degree. I mean, we couldn't be doing what we're doing right now in Africa as fast as we're doing without the Nairobi Center. So that, it's, in a way, don't try, if you're already thinking of programs and you're already sort of known or you have contacts in the region, then I would just encourage everyone to go, because our own experience has been it's really helpful, and it'll move things much faster than you can do yourself sitting here.
Thank you, Richard, for that. And just bear in mind that the oldest of the centers is 4 years old, and the youngest is 1 month old. So, I think, perhaps there will be many opportunities where we're going to, I love and I jump at something that we hadn't done, we hadn't thought of, because it's an opportunity for us to learn. As we try to support you in a project, we learn and we expand our base.
Safwan, it's a good thing you have a pediatrician here.
You're right. You're going to save me as a dermatologist.
I think we've exhausted our comments. Do you have one last?
Well, a quick one. It sort of follows your point. I think you have a new definition of success. You have an opportunity. And I'm thinking about brain drain, right? So you have several PhD students coming and they stay in the US. Especially if your donors are based in India or in Jordan,
want them to
and
go
they've
back.
been successful. I think they could be sensitive to that. And so maybe you could help them fund some sort of return packages.
Absolutely.
Yes, you're right. Especially PhD. Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you.